Our last speaker is Marc Pelka. He is the Deputy Director of State Initiatives at the Council of State Governments Justice Center, where he is in his 10th year of working intensively in states across the country using a justice reinvestment approach. And this is an approach where state leaders leverage the CSG Justice Center's assistance to analyze criminal justice data, engage criminal justice system stakeholders, and develop consensus-based policy options to increase public safety and avoid correction costs. And Wisconsin was, I understand, one of the first such states that Marc worked in. And in talking with him, he noted that a highlight from his first experience was experiencing Wisconsin tailgating, complete with cheese curds and brats before a Brewers game. And he's really hoping to be invited back someday because he'd like to try it out before a football game. So we hope that that will happen. And before joining the CSG Justice Center, Mr. Pelka served on the communications and policy staff in the Connecticut House of Representatives, including as a policy aide to the Speaker of the House. And he earned his Master of Public Policy degree in criminal justice policy from the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. And he's pleased to join us today because improving employment outcomes for people with criminal histories is a priority for the CSG Justice Center's board, which represents a cross-section of bipartisan, interbranch leaders from state and local governments who shape criminal justice policy in various jurisdictions across the country. And we're very happy to have him here today to present his presentation, which was prepared with the assistance of his colleague, policy analyst Erica Nelson, who's also with us here today, and is titled Improving Employment Outcomes for People with Criminal Histories.
Thank you very much, Hillary, for a very generous introduction. It is such a pleasure to be back in Wisconsin. I remember 8 to 9 years ago when I was making trips on an almost weekly basis, sometimes 2 or 3 times a month to the state, and I had the pleasure of presenting to a Ledge Council study committee and got to know Senator Olson, who was a member of that committee, and many lawmakers, both sides of the aisle, both chambers and state agency cabinet officials and staff, and it's a real pleasure to be back. And this morning, when I was kind of getting psyched up for the presentation, I was looking around my hotel room and saw that these issues are indeed on the forefront of many people's minds. I looked at the Madison magazine here, cover story on second chances, how offenders in Dane County stand to gain a clean slate if restorative justice programs are made an option. And then in another newspaper, the Isthmus, left behind, who looks out for children when their parents go to prison. And yesterday's USA Today, which I failed to grab, had another cover story about the impact of the opioid epidemic. And that's what really fuels policymakers' interest in looking at what are ways to improve outcomes for people in the justice system, ways to reduce victims, way to increase public safety, way to avoid cost. And employment is increasingly becoming a focus of that. And Erica Nelson, my coworker, who has expertise in employment and has worked very hard to connect people in correction systems with employment and engage employers, and we're both thrilled to be in front of you. These are some staggering statistics concerning the impact of criminal history on a person's desire to, or the person's ability to gain employment. That 70 million adults across the country, or 1 in 3 adults, has a criminal record. 87% of employers conduct criminal background checks, and a criminal record can reduce the likelihood of a job offer by nearly half. Second, we look at federal, state, and local governments. All are struggling with the size of the populations under correctional control. There are 6.7 million people in the United States who are in jails, on supervision, in prison. And 95% of people who serve time in prison will return afterwards to the community. And 68% will be rearrested within 3 years. So state policymakers across the aisle are looking for ways to avoid a person becoming in the justice system and to lower the likelihood they will return afterwards. And employment is a key part of successful reentry. I think when we all look back to our current jobs or past jobs, this information will really resonate. It certainly does with me when I think about my first job in high school, is that having a job exposes you to many pro-social benefits, from pro-social activities to generating income for your family, engaging in fewer risky activities, establishing stronger positive relationships. All of those positive pro-social characteristics can lower your chance of reoffending, especially when that job is above minimum wage and that job is a stable one for you to have. So employment in itself is not a kind of silver bullet to reducing recidivism, but it's a way to structure people's time to produce these positive outcomes while also leveraging interventions that work to reduce recidivism. So across the country, states are focusing on three main areas for improving outcomes for people with criminal histories. The first, improving job readiness and reducing recidivism. Second, engaging employers. And third, reducing policy barriers to employment. So we'll begin with the first one concerning building the skills to succeed in the workforce. The first three kind of items at the top, I think, identify some of what we know from the research, that simply connecting someone to a job has not been shown on its face to reduce recidivism. And not everyone with a criminal record or a criminal history needs the same services. And higher risk people with more needs, require more intensive interventions, like cognitive behavioral interventions. And people who are lower risk can actually be exposed to a greater chance of reoffending if they're drawn into more intensive programs or stricter supervision. So let's focus on what we know does work. That assessing the level of job readiness and the likelihood of recidivism is essential and timely information for making referrals to appropriate programs. And addressing those underlying needs, which the next couple slides will focus on, is essential to reducing recidivism and improving employment outcomes. And then finally, matching people to services based on the results of those assessments. There's an array of programs and services and interventions that are available, but we know that the different interventions and programs will have different results based on whom you prioritize and what services you deliver. And when I use the word recidivism, I'm meaning it generally. Typically, someone who's in the justice system, what are their chances of becoming re-involved following completion or that involvement in the system? And it can mean re-arrest or re-conviction or re-incarceration. But if I specify a specific measure of recidivism, I'll provide it. But I'm speaking most generally about the outcomes of the system. So the great news is there are decades of studies, randomized controlled experiments, quasi-experimental studies, case studies from different states to look at what works for reducing recidivism. And that research has identified eight central risk factors that are most strongly associated with recidivism. This forms the risk-need responsivity model that underpins so much of what your Department of Corrections here administers in terms of supervision and programs and what jurisdictions across the entire country are applying. So you can see in the outer rim there that indeed employment and education, that's typically someone's attitude toward those, and typically their success with those with employment and education, along with substance use of leisure time, how you spend your free time, and family and marital are all important areas for impacting recidivism. Those areas in blue are in boldface and red because those are the most predictive. They inform how people think, the values and beliefs and philosophies they have, the personality patterns they have, whom they associate with. Those all impact your ability to both remain crime-free and also to succeed in the workplace. If you have significant challenges in those four areas and you're working, your chances of succeeding, your chances of remaining crime-free are less. So that opens up sort of the very clear track around what works involving corrections and reentry and supervision. But let's focus now on what works in terms of employment. Now, there's no national consensus on defining or assessing who's ready for work or who is job ready, but there is a list of kind of skills for employability that help people succeed in the labor market, from use of technology and communication, critical thinking. Those, no matter the sector, no matter the position, those are fairly universal. So that's another track around what are factors that make someone employable in the workforce. In 2013, the CSU Justice Center released a white paper called the Integrated Reentry and Employment Strategies Framework. And I'm really excited in a couple slides to be sharing with you ways that Wisconsin and Milwaukee County are applying this. But this was an effort to put that research into a white paper to list what we know works from the corrections and the reentry field, what works from the workforce field, and how we can align those two tracks to learn from each field to break the cycle of reincarceration and or joblessness. And these areas are so interconnected. There are already people with records and histories showing up in front of jobs, skills, and workforce development providers. And we know from any conversation with prosecutors and judges and corrections officials that employment is a key part of successful reentry. So a main component of the framework is how you allocate your resources and how you match people to services. And we call that the resource allocation and service matching tool. It applies that research I just went through and provides a way for corrections and the employment field to first, number one, assess for risk of reoffense and needs to succeed. Second, assessing job readiness. And then third, delivering those targeted services. You want to make sure that you're leveraging your scarce resources and focusing them on people who will benefit most from that intervention. And also you want to make sure that your job skills are applied based on the level of intensity or the type of need. In the workforce field, people may have a type of need that involves job readiness. Others may need help to find and retain a job. So there's a level of avoiding one size fits all, and let's customize it. And so here's the exciting news to share is that Wisconsin in Milwaukee County was one of two sites selected nationally, the other is Palm Beach County, Florida, to apply this IRES framework, to take it, what was research and programming, and operationalize it. And the reason why Wisconsin and Milwaukee County were selected is because of the high-level leadership. And so there's an executive committee established that oversees the effort involving Lieutenant Governor, Senator Taylor, Representative Hutton, Mayor Barrett, DOC Secretary Litcher, and then Department of Workforce Development, Secretary Allen, who are all overseeing guiding it. Second, there is a mature infrastructure of job skills programs and services in Milwaukee County. It's a county that receives the largest percentage of people leaving prison, and this is a 3-year process that Wisconsin and Milwaukee County are going through, and with that sustained leadership and the development of available resources, they're now going through an evaluation process, but we have issued a kind of executive summary that covers information that we had gathered through surveys and review, planning and implementation. And I think what's really exciting to share is that the workforce field and corrections and reentry are sharing information about the people who are returning to Milwaukee County from 4 prisons in the Department of Corrections system. And that's being done in a timely manner through coordination involving the Milwaukee County Workforce Board actually meeting with people in prison prior to their release and performing a job readiness assessment, which is combined with the existing risk and need assessments that the DOC administers, and then they're building pathways to the community so that when the person returns, there's already this prioritization of person for the right service and the right intensity of service. And so this is an opportunity to show how a state can operationalize the research in the program and apply it. I have a couple other examples to show for case studies. Your neighbor in Michigan Department of Corrections have created a vocational village, which applies a lot of the research I've mentioned already about structuring people's time. This is provided to people who are in prison and are preparing for reentry. While they're behind bars, they're receiving services that are prioritized based on risk and need and job readiness, and they're getting hands-on education training in industries of forecasted growth. So they're learning from employers about what are the positions outside the prisons where employers have a need for this workforce. And second, providing them with the industry-recognized certification, such as automotive repair. So when people come out to the community and seek jobs, they have the credentials, they have the training, they have the programming in place. So we often look at a lot of what Julie was covering so well with the outcome analysis is looking at evaluation and what are the assessments. A transitional employment program that is significant based in New York City. They have offices around the country. It's called the Center for Employment Opportunities, CEO Works. They provide transitional employment for people who need that level of intensity of programming. CEO serves as the employer. They connect people with employment in the nonprofit or private or public sector. They not only connect people to work and begin or continue to build their resume, but they also provide them with the skills training and the programs to reduce recidivism over that time period. So they did a randomized controlled experiment design, which I know that many of the researchers in the room know is the gold standard for evaluation. And the CEO participants had a lower recidivism rate than similar people who did not go through the program but received more limited assistance. It's a 5.6 percentage point difference, and the results were statistically significant. So for the right people, who are returning from prison who go through this program. It's a great opportunity to combine the idea of both recidivism reduction programming and job readiness preparation. So those are the kind of the big themes we wanted to highlight. Is first, for the first section, is encouraging partnerships between corrections, reentry, and workforce, and then trying to bring that to scale statewide, trying to operationalize that. Not existing it within one county or one program or one provider, but really looking for how a state can take these principles and bring them to scale across the state. And we'd also recommend that there are a range of federal funding opportunities to increase access to services, from the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, which is a federal fund from the Department of Labor that focuses resources from education and job skills for populations most in need of employment preparation, and then also various grants that come from the U.S. Departments of Justice and Education and Labor to help to build up the resources and services available to meet the need. Because again, Milwaukee County was an area highlighted for this opportunity because of the maturity of the infrastructure of resources, which we know vary considerably across each of your counties and across each of your cities. And so every area is a little bit different. And to that end, engaging employers is central, because there is, just as with our programming, in terms of getting the right people in line for positions, it's going to vary from municipality to municipality and region to region. So under the previous White House in 2014, there was a convening of corporate and business leaders in employment. Business and corporate leaders and employers who came to look at this issue of how to improve outcomes for people with criminal records. And those companies surrounding that meeting that day signed a Fair Chance Business Pledge to enact policies to increase the hiring of people with criminal records into their corporations and to their businesses, which is great for the ability to have that national reach. And what's helped is that that conversation has continued at the national level and in states across the country around what are the outcomes for people who have records and get hired. And many of these employers are emphasizing that retention rates, this is what Butterball Farms covered, people with records have the same retention rate, if not better, than those without records. And even in Uber, they noted that people with criminal records had the same or better in terms of star ratings from their passengers they drove around. So private sector is really coming forward and highlighting their desire to do better on this issue. So we identified some of the key priorities for how state officials and local officials can engage employers. And the very first one is collecting information about where those growth industries are. So you make sure, if you're providing the training for people prior to reentry, that you are matching the needs that exist within your employer base. And you understand the inventory barriers. What are the occupational licensing restrictions that might make it challenging for employers to find the right fit? You listen to employers on what are the ways that you can better identify the marketable skills they're searching for, understand the hiring practices, and get guidance in terms of how programs can best meet their needs. In terms of establishing partnerships, employers like talking to employers and hearing what's working. And so there's an ability to convene employers by sector, through sector partnerships, leverage the chambers of commerce across the states, and build relationships with champions who can, like Butterball, like these other companies, that can go and talk about the benefits of hiring people with records or histories. And finally, creating win-win opportunities for how you can, I guess, inspire government, for business leaders and employers with the benefits of hiring, make the job easier for them, providing incentives and partnering with workforce agencies to overcome any logistical challenges to getting people into work. We've helped to convene from the Justice Center staff over 60 different employer engagement events around the country. And the lessons learned from those employer engagement sessions are all available online in a toolkit that we house at the National Reentry Resource Center, the link up on top. Everything from creating an invitation to an agenda, talking points, surveys, media outreach and coverage. These are incredibly illuminating. We helped with one in Milwaukee in 2014. We're eager to help with more regions in Wisconsin. It's a great way to solicit input and learn where to focus your resources. And so not only those employer engagement events, but also helping employers to access those resources for practical guidance on fair hiring, bonding programs to protect from financial liability, tax incentives, and various partnerships between job skill training programs and business sectors are all the different ways that you can apply. there's a lot of kind of surveys and focus groups and reports coming out about what employers are looking for. And one thing that's striking me is that there is variation across city or across sector or across type of job in terms of what they're looking for. In some cases, it's transitional employment, it's broad skill development or specific training for that particular position. Others are interested in the workforce opportunity tax credits or ways to leverage incentives or protect bonding. And some also say that it relates to some of the policy barriers that exist regarding employment. And I think the first policy barrier that comes up involves collateral consequences of a criminal conviction. And this is an area that state policymakers have asked us for assistance with because of how complicated this area is. Collateral consequences, pure and simple, are legal and regulatory standards and restrictions that may hire an individual's attempt to gain employment, gain an occupational license, the right to vote, housing, benefits, scholarships, employment. And there are, we counted 40,000 collateral consequences in federal and state law, and half are job related. And we house the national inventory of the collateral consequences of criminal conviction, again with the website up on top. What makes this hard for policymakers is how far strung these collateral consequences are in your state statutes. They cover all a range of sections and subsections, and they cover a whole range of different consequences. And these have been around in many places since the colonial period. There's been an increase in them beginning in the 90s. There's also been growing appetite for rolling back some of these collateral consequences or providing greater discretion in those areas. And we were able to count from this inventory that Wisconsin statutes have 702 on the books as of 2013. That inventory enables you to click on your state and pull up and see where they're all located. And it can be a helpful way if you hear from job seekers or employers about challenges that they're seeing involving this, match it to the statute in your code. Then the next issue is around criminal records. Criminal records can be acquired across the system. And I think I'm always struck when I'm reviewing the fact that 1 in 3 adults has a record, 70 million adults have a record. One reason why that number is so high is because they span all areas in the justice system. If you're arrested but released, if you are tried but acquitted, or charges are dismissed, a record is created. And in some ways, the way the information is provided, it may not just be an indication of what type of record you have, but that you came back as having a record, equating perhaps an arrest that did not lead to a conviction with an actual sentence. But these are the array of areas that collect different records. So states are looking at 3 main ways to figure out how to address criminal records. The first is around criminal record clearance, which is a general category, an umbrella term that we use to include record sealing and record expungement, which is either the covering of the record to make it unable to be seen or removing it. The second is around fair chance hiring, or it's often known as ban the box. So whereas a clearing of a record will remove it or prevent it from being seen, the ban the box or the fair hiring would guide the consideration of a criminal record. It may prohibit certain records from being considered. For example, if it doesn't relate directly to the job, that's person's record, or it can consider only job-related offenses, or giving people a chance to explain. Finally, certificates of rehabilitation are becoming an increasingly common tool. They enable courts or state agencies to issue certificates to affirm someone's progress toward rehabilitation or acquisition of a training and skills. And it also can, in some cases, shield employers from liability for hiring. And the issue with the certificates is they vary from state to state in terms of what they provide, whether they provide shielding, and also to what extent people are able to access those certificates. It relies a greater degree on implementation of the certificates of employability, the extent to which there are perhaps lawyers or providing assistance to inform the employers of what these certificates are, or people who are seeking jobs and what this actually provides. When it comes to record clearance or fair chance hiring, it's a little bit more straightforward in terms of how it's carried out. So I have 3 maps to share with you, just to give you a sense of activity. First concerns the fair chance hiring or banning of the box, and 30 states, plus over 150 cities and counties have enacted some form of these guidance concerning how a criminal record is takes a part in a job interview or employment consideration. The teal states, which form the bulk, have ban-the-box or fair chance hiring policies for all public employees. It's in state law. The red states cover both public and private. That's been an increasing trend in a smaller number of states, is applying the fair chance hiring to private employers. Orange are some local, but no state. And finally, some gray ones involve no state or local. So your policies here in Wisconsin apply to state employees as well as to Milwaukee, Madison cities, and then Dane and Milwaukee counties. I think that these next two slides just illustrate the growing bipartisan movement toward enacting various policies. These are the states between 2009 and 2014 that have passed some policy to promote employment and civil law changes, from the certificates to the incentivizing of hiring, to fair hiring. I mean to show here there are a range of options available, and it's happening across geography, size, kind of political, ideological location on the spectrum, if you can create one, and also kind of where the state's situated. So the options are listed in a Vera Institute of Justice report called Relief in Sight. And the same goes here for criminal record clearance, looking at how your laws guide the clearing of policy following a criminal conviction or a record being generated within the system. Resources are available at our Clean Slate Clearinghouse, similar to our inventory. You can again log in at cleanslateclearinghouse.org and click on Wisconsin. I did it this morning, and it lists what your policies are concerning record clearance. It links you to, which can help inform policy. If you're a person with a record, it can actually guide you to some legal assistance that's available, and you can compare across states what the differences are. I would not mean to come in here and provide a recommendation about one policy approach or the other. I want to provide you with some resources for where you can find the right information to guide what policy would fit your state, and this is a great resource to use. So closing, I would say in the bottom paragraph there, access those resources to compare your state. Feel free to contact us as a technical assistance provider for comparing states. Consider fair chance hiring policies and ways to help to improve, reduce the barriers to employment. And it's a lot that I kind of race through in here because it's a really growing field, as evidenced by the newspaper coverage and just in my efforts to go around to different states that is coming up on the employer side, on the employee side, about how in these tight labor markets do we find the right ways to fill our needs. And they really come across these three areas of improving job readiness, reducing recidivism, building those skills, applying what works, engaging employers to help them address their needs and fit the needs they have, and then reducing the policy barriers to employment. So I hope that's helpful, and happy to explore any questions or comments that folks have.
Thank you so much, Mark.